Hi, everybody. Hi, good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us here at the Welding Women Syndicate. It is a pleasure to have you guys. Tonight, we will be having Gabby Nieto. She is probably one of our younger guests on the program. She's going to be 24 this Sunday. So happy birthday, Gabby. She went to her college and graduated with her associates at 17 going on 18, and now she is the supervisor of the engineering department at Forney Industry, as well as a part-time instructor at Front Range College. So as soon as she jumps on, it's going to be awesome to talk to her about her journey getting to welding and then throughout her career, as well as what she's doing now. Let me see if she has jumped on yet. Where are you at, Miss Gabby? There she is. All right. Miss Gabby Nieto. Hi.
Hello.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing good.
Got
Just
some
gave
weird lighting.
everybody a small introduction on you and let them know that it's your birthday this Sunday. So happy early birthday.
Thank you.
And I also let them know that you were super young when you got your associates. You're 17 going on 18.
Yeah.
And now you hold the position of supervisor of engineering department at Forney Industry. So congratulations.
Thank you.
All right, give me a small intro on yourself. So I know so I guess let me give them a little bit of backstory. I met you when I was working at Extreme Off-Road at the Power Nation series, and we had Forney come down over, and they had you come over as our ambassador, and we filmed you welding, and you worked on our Ranger that we were working on, and I was just in complete enamoration and admiration for you because you were so very well spoken. You were only 22 at that time, now that I'm thinking about the math. And
Yep.
so, I mean, I totally thought that there was no way you were 22. Like you were 20 something hiding in a 22-year-old body. But it was very awesome to see somebody like you being so successful, so young, and then just so fresh faced and awesome in the industry. So I was very enamored and wanted to keep in touch with you. And so I'm so glad we did.
Yeah, me too. Thank you. Um, yeah, so I graduated high school and then a year later graduated college. It was really like 6 months and then I was done, but I took another class and couldn't graduate till the year after. But so it was all pretty fast, and I knew if I didn't go to college, I probably never would. So I decided, all right, let's go for it. And so then I got my associates in welding, and then I ended up at Forney, so through a couple hoops to get there and worked a couple side jobs, but then we got to Forney Industries and also an instructor at Front Range Community College. So
That is amazing. That's a whirlwind from 17 to 24. You've lived a couple of lives in between there. So I know when we were talking and I asked about how you were interested in welding, you told me that you actually wanted to pursue cosmetology.
yeah. So I've always wanted to do cosmetology. It's what my mom did when she was younger and stuff. So I was like, oh yeah, that's really cool. And I've always been into hair and makeup and nails and all that good stuff. So I think it would be awesome. And then as a junior in high school, I did the automotive program, and I was like, I need to know how to do some of this stuff. I can't always ask somebody else to do it for me. So I got really into working on vehicles and stuff, and then
Mm-hmm.
we got to the electrical side, and I was like, ooh, I don't know if this is for me.
Uh-huh.
So then I decided to go a different way and do welding the next year because I didn't want to be stuck in class. And so the reason I even wanted to try is because there was these kids out in the same yard. We shared the same yard for welding and automotive, and I was changing the oil on this Dodge, and I remember being underneath it and watching these kids like heat up this piece of metal and just bang on it with these hammers, and I'm like, what is happening over there? And a couple of weeks later, they actually had it back out there, and they had a fire in it, and it was a hand, and it was welded into a fire pit. And I was like, okay, that's cool. Like,
Oh, that
so
is cool.
yeah, so I was like, wow, you can be creative with that? Okay, let's go try that. So that's kind of why I even wanted to pursue the welding side. So
Oh, that's neat. So you were a junior then when you went to auto tech, and then a senior when you joined the welding program there?
yeah. Hmm.
Oh, that is
Yeah.
so neat. And so
Yeah.
after you graduated and you're thinking about what to do after high school, was welding school immediately your go-to?
Yeah, so like I kind of liked it at the beginning and I was like, yeah, this is cool, but I don't know if I want to continue to do this. I was very uncertain. Obviously, I had a lot of different dreams I was working towards and didn't quite know where I wanted to go. Um, but the last semester of my senior year, my little sister actually passed away. And she loved what I did and she always aspired to be like me.
Mm-hmm.
So it was really hard to kind of continue with what I was doing and to graduate high school and finish the welding program. There's just a lot going on in life. But I think really what drove me was knowing that like she would want me to continue to do something that I love. And
Uh-huh.
she knew that she saw that in me that I loved that and
Mhm.
loved welding and creating things. And that's really what pushed me to just continue. And I had awesome mentors at Front Range. I still talk to them all the time and they actually teach with me now. So
Uh-huh.
that's really exciting. And they just pushed me to continue to strive for this welding career. So thanks to them and Josh especially he just pushed me and was like, "You can do this. Like, this is what you want to do. You know
Oh.
it is." And if it wasn't for them, I don't know where I would be.
Oh my
So,
gosh. So what an amazing story. I mean, I'm so sorry to hear about your sister, but it's almost like welding found you and your
mhm.
sister divine intervention just all came together and, made you
Yeah,
happy. That's amazing. It's
yeah,
it's
it's a
amazing how much how therapeutic the trades can be. I have a kind of not a
yeah,
similar story, but I do know that I find a lot of solace within what I do. So I can only
yeah,
imagine how you feel with that too.
yeah. It helped a lot. It was like, all right, let's go in here, let's get stuff done, and let's impress everybody so we can go somewhere with this. And so that was just kind of my mentality, and I just kept with it, and I never gave up. So I think that
That's
was the biggest thing.
amazing. That's amazing. Well, you definitely are impressive. So let's talk about. So you went to then Front Range College, then, right?
Yep, Front Range Community College in
Okay.
Fort Collins. Yep.
So tell me about your program and how that was transitioning from high school program over to college courses.
Yeah, so in the high school program, we learned to do all like the bin testing and our performance tests and just every kind of aspect of welding that you need to be certified. And so we did a portion of that, and then every other week we would switch over and we would do projects.
Mhm.
And so we would get to use our creative side in fabrication, and then we
Mhm.
would get to weld. And I think probably without that experience, I don't know if I would have continued because once I got to the college side, you're in a booth for 4 hours or whatever your class is, 4 to 2 hours, and
Mhm.
you're in there and you're welding the whole time. And obviously, like, it's a lot of work to continue to weld and put out so many welds in those hours, and you're learning. So we all know how frustrating it is to learn how to weld. You get it when you get it, but until then, it's like, oh man, I just want this to be perfect.
Mhm.
I'm also a perfectionist, so I have a hard time with doing learning new things just because I want it to be perfect right away, and I know that that's not realistic. But so that was kind of what I strived for in those classes, and those classes are offered in the daytime and at night so that it works with everybody's schedule. So I was also able to have a job, and I TA'd at the college while I
Mhm.
was actually going to school. So I was a kind of just like a helper for the high school program. So
Oh, that's
after I was
neat.
out of it, I just helped continue to do that. And in class, I always found myself like oh, hey, if you try this, it might get a better weld, or hey,
Hmm.
if you grind it like this, this might work a little bit better. And I was always telling people that, and the guys would look at me and they'd be like, okay, whatever you say, like you don't know what you're talking about. And then they'd go, and a couple of days later, they'd always come over and be like, hey, thank you so much for telling me that. And so it's like it was always fun trying to like push that barrier and be like, look, I can help you. And so I've always loved doing that. So after I graduated my
Hmm.
program. So I was in high school, and then it just took 6 months to finish that program because the credits I received while I was in high school. And
Hmm.
then it continued into the college program, and I just finished that pretty quickly, actually. It was really nice to, to be in and then be like, okay, well, now let's find something else. And while
Hmm.
I was at the college, we had lots of opportunities, job options,
Hmm.
and I knew that I needed to go somewhere before I could come back and teach, because that's really what I love to do, is just teach people how to use the equipment and how to weld and just how to be successful in life. I really thrive off of that.
Uh-huh.
Um, so I went and worked as a assembler for a rehabilitation company. So we
Hmm.
make equipment for people that need the rehabilitation on their movements. And so when I did that, I was like, oh, yeah, this is kind of fun. And then that company ended up falling through, and something happened where I had to find a new position. And so I was like, okay, I need to continue to get hours so I can go back and teach.
Yeah.
So then I ended up getting enough work hours to meet the criteria to go and be a part-time teacher. So
Hmm.
now I get to teach at the college that uh, basically I created my life from, because without the college, I don't know where I would be, like I said before. So
Oh, that's amazing. So that's completely full circle then. So
yeah,
you learned
yeah,
there, went out into the world, got some hours, and then came back and started teaching. So tell me
yeah.
about, I think that you kind of touched upon a small niche in the welding community that a lot of people
Hmm.
don't know about. So a lot of medical equipment is needed
Hmm.
for rehabilitation, or titanium for like inside your body, like,
Yeah.
ball and sockets and all that other stuff. So that's a really niche part of welding. Did you consider getting into that kind of stuff?
Um, it wasn't super like sanitized and like medical equipment necessarily. It was more like bikes, so you could move it with your arms, and if you were
Mm-hmm.
like your legs were paralyzed, then it would move your legs. So it wasn't super specialized. I would say it was probably more just like a side fab job. But I did think about going into more like the medical side of welding. My neighbor was actually a part of machining medical equipment, so I always thought that was really cool. But the only other thing I really had thought about going into was micro welding. So
Okay.
I always thought that like I love TIG welding. That's my favorite process of welding, and that's what I actually teach at the college.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, yeah, micro welding would be so cool. It's just little tiny, and I just thought it was amazing, and I've always wanted to learn how to do that. But that's really the only other side. I mean, fabrication and things like that are always on my wheelhouse, but that was kind
If
of
you
like
were
the
teaching,
specialty
that was
welding.
probably what you would have gone towards. Because
Yeah,
that's
I
a really
wanted.
neat industry, even though you say it's like not the, part of, but that definitely
Mhm.
kind of starts to open up the doors for the stepping stones to get to that kind of welding.
Yeah, definitely.
That's neat. And also about the micro welding. So I know a lot of, I don't really know, I know a little bit about the micro welding, but if you want to expand on that, definitely do so.
So I just like saw a video one day and I thought it was pretty cool. And then I looked into a place that did it. I didn't really investigate a whole lot on the actual process. I know that that company, they welded like regulators and different parts for regulators, and that's what their main focus was. But then after I decided that I didn't want to, I was just like, okay, let's move on to the
Yeah.
next thing.
Hey, but that's
So
neat because that's something that you've got, goal
yeah,
wise, maybe further on down the line.
yeah,
So
yeah,
I
definitely.
got to see your welds firsthand, and oh my gosh, they were absolutely gorgeous, stunning, stunning work. So we were talking about your second job and getting back into um, the community college, but tell us about your internship with Forney.
Yeah, so I was actually still a college student when I got the offer at Forney.
Mm-hmm.
And what they reached out, they asked for somebody that could make phone calls to service centers around the U.S. that could help repair Forney welders. So I don't like talking on the phone. I never liked talking on the phone, so that was very out of my comfort zone. And once again, I'd mentioned Josh before. He was like, "No, I think you need to do this," and I was like, "But I don't know how I feel about this. Like, I don't want to talk to people that I didn't really know a whole lot about Forney when I first started." And so I was like, I have to talk to these people about something that I don't really know and I didn't feel comfortable with. And so it was very outside of my comfort zone. And Josh pushed me. He's like, just go do it. You're gonna be happy that you did it. And so I was like, okay, let's do this. And I went in and had the interview, and by the end of the interview, they're like, we would love to hire you, but we need you to wait a couple days so that we can say we looked around and we can come back to you. So they ended up calling me a couple days later and hired me. And in that position, if I had some extra time on the days that I was there a little longer, because I did this while I was still going to college, so it was in between classes. And in that position, I actually did get paid for that internship. It was just pretty much minimum wage, but I did get paid for that position, which was really nice. Also, like I said, it helped push me out of my comfort zone. So I would go into work and I'd sit at this desk and I had this whole folder of all of these people I needed to call. And every day I would call 25, 30 people and talk to them about repairing these welders, and I just tried to stand strong and tell them that that they needed to help us and we would love their help, and that we would work together as a team. And it was really just very, very nerve-wracking the whole entire time.
I can imagine. So this is almost like cold calling then, right?
Yeah,
them and trying to convince them to get a program started to start refurbishing welders.
And 5 years ago, honestly, not a lot of people knew about Forney. We were just kind of trying to run back up. And so I would call and they'd be like, oh, you guys made airplanes or helicopters, or because that's what J.D. Forney used to do back when they first started in 1932. So it was like, no, we make welders now. We would love to have you as a service center and to work with you as a partner. And so it was always fun trying to call and explain who we were, on top of trying to ask them to repair these welders that I've never even touched. So my supervisor at the time was like, what we're going to do is we're going to put you with the service techs and you're going to help them go through these welders. So over that time, I learned the inside of the welders and what was going on with them. And that was super cool to be the person that knows how to use these machines but knows nothing about the internals. Which kind of comes back to it being funny that I quit automotive because of electrical. And then this is what I found, but I guess that's just how it works. So after I did that, I would go back with the service techs and I would just look at these welders and learn all the things that I could about them, about how your power is converted and how all of these different softwares help your machine work with the settings you have set and to create your weld the way that you want it to. So I thought that was awesome because I was like, wait, what? This is the inside of a welder? Okay, let's do this. And so after that, it was like, okay, well, I don't really know what I can do here because they weren't really hiring in the service department. And so what had happened is our service center was always under our operations team. And our operations team didn't know a whole lot about repairing welders. So my boss came in and he started the engineering service department in 2017. And that's when he came to me and said, hey, would you like to be a service tech for me? I know you have this background and I would love for you to work with me. I was like, okay, maybe there is potential at this company. And so I helped start the engineering service department at Forney Industries. And then I was a engineering service technician. So basically what I did is I answered phone calls. So when customers call in and they're having issues with machines, I took those technical phone calls. I still do that now, but more so then. I would also, when a customer would have an issue with their machine and it needed to come in for a repair, I took care of all of the process for that, repaired the inside of those machines and replaced units to get that one back up and running, and just tried to to work out the whole service area that we were all just kind of learning at the same time. So
Wow.
to be now moving on, 3 years later, my boss always told me, well, we'll get you up in there. We'll try to get you to like a senior tech or a manager or supervisor position. And I said, well, okay, I guess that's what I want. Like, I'm young. I don't know what I want. I don't know what I want to do. And so I was like, okay, let's keep going. And then I got the raise to senior engineering service technician because I have my associates in welding and because I have all of the technical background now that I've learned from Forney, I had qualified for that position. So that was a good feeling. And then a few years later, it leads us to now. Now I'm the supervisor of the engineering service department, which is just still unbelievable to me. I still can't even, like, when people ask me what I'm doing, I'm like, oh, I'm the supervisor now. It's like I never saw myself being in a position like this. So it's really cool to kind of feel the other side because sure, I could be out under a hood all day welding, and I could be learning lots of stuff about fabrication and settings and machines and all these different aspects of welding. But I think I've learned so much at Forney that it's just so valuable. I've learned how the insides of those machines actually operate and how you move power through this machine to create a weld, like to melt metal together. That's crazy.
Yeah, because it's one thing to know the process on how to weld and what to weld and settings and all that other stuff. That's a lot of knowledge. But then to know exactly how the process happens on the inside of that machine, that not too many people know that. And that's usually, we were talking about this, reserved for like the engineers. But I mean, you've been there from the get-go, from the inception of the program, that exactly how things work. And I'm more than sure that you have to work in together with the engineers, like when they're superseding parts or like trying to figure out what works best for say machines that aren't working well. So speaking of that, I know that Tiff is like dying. She loves Forney products, and she is dying for me to ask you about which rod is best to use instead of the 6010 and why you can't use it on the EZ 140.
So 6010 is hard because it's a low hydrogen rod. So because you have a machine that doesn't have a good CV, which means that, so that machine, because it's an inverter machine, I'm trying to think about how to explain this.
I'm so sorry.
You're okay. So it's the way that, for instance, if you think about running a root weld, so you're welding a gap and you're trying to get the penetration through the middle and you want your rod to continue to burn. So if you don't have a good open circuit voltage, then what happens is that arc will die out because it can't bridge the gap of that joint.
Okay.
So with an inverter, it's really hard to get them to do that. And 6010 is just a very fun rod to run as is, with high amperage as well. But you can also use a 6011. So 6011 still gives you a high penetration, and it runs a little bit better on that machine. Those machines are very, we base them towards our DIY users and to just kind of like beginner welders. So they're not necessarily meant to run everything perfectly. I know that isn't always what we want to hear, but the 6010 rod is a fun animal to play with to try to get those machines to run it. But the bigger machines, once you get into like the 220 volt or like the 180 ST, then you can create that weld and that 6010 will run. That machine just doesn't have enough power to it.
Gotcha. No, so the reason why Tiffany is asking is because she's oh my God, I'm brain farting and losing my words. She is an instructor also, and so that is that is one of like the machines that she tells people that is super great to get because it's got the various processes and it's able to run a variety of things that they need to practice on, and it's easily obtainable. But she was saying that was something that her students do come across um, with the machine, but she absolutely loves horning. And so I do know that we talked about it earlier about maybe running some tech tips. I know that she would definitely love to jump on one with you, and so we're going to be setting that for a future date.
Awesome. Yeah.
And so like so speaking of like what exactly you do with the refurbishment of the welders,
Mhm.
was there any additional classes or like things that you kind of had to like have homework aside to do to like catch up on the inside, what's going on inside of the welder and like the component side of it that you didn't
Yeah.
necessarily learn from school?
So I think we more learned it from one another. This machines are funny because when you have a circuit board, it's really a plug and play situation at that point. If
Mm-hmm.
you're trying to replace component parts, it gets to be more expensive than just replacing a whole board.
Uh-huh.
So what we do is we just replace full components. So it's really just a super simple plug and play. The hard part is really tracing it. So with training and stuff, I didn't necessarily get any like certificates or anything like that for the electrical side of it. What I did have to do is, like you said, lots of homework.
Mm-hmm.
I had to study a lot of this stuff, but my boss was also like, this is your job, so take the time to do this at work. So that's always really nice is that they gave us like videos and all of this study work to do, and that really helped with understanding that process and also learning from everybody else around me. Everybody else around me really helped be like, no, this is what we got to do. This is how you follow it. So
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a lot to our team and to the skills that we had in our team to be able to all work together and teach each other how to do this.
Yeah, that's neat. That's definitely a testament to your dedication. Because if you don't have a manual or like somebody like running a program, it's easy to get lost in everything. And
Yeah.
so you must have excellent diagnostic skills. So do you have to answer like those kind of calls like, hey, I'm running this machine, these settings, and I'm not getting the welds that I'm wanting to get. Do you break that down with clients and say, okay, this is what you're going to need to try or do?
Yeah, definitely. We get on average. Um, so I have a team of two technicians and then myself, and then I also have um, technical service. So technical service has one technician. They're under customer service.
Mm-hmm.
And I have trained her as well how to troubleshoot all these machines.
Mm-hmm.
So a customer will call and say, hey, I'm running 035 in my 140 MP, and I have this tension, or they usually don't give you that much information. Usually they're
Yeah.
saying, I'm using this, and this isn't working. Tell me why it's not
Yeah.
working. So then you have to bribe. You have to bribe and pull that information out of
Mm-hmm.
everybody. And so you just kind of go through the whole setup and you say, okay, what size of wire are you using? What do you have your machine set to? What
Mm-hmm.
tension do you have? You have to go through all of those fine steps before you can really find out what's going on with a customer's machine. Um, for example, like on our 190 MP welders,
Mm-hmm.
that machine, the motor is actually regulated. So if the machine senses that that motor has too much voltage because
Yeah.
it's cranked down too far, it'll actually short the machine and it'll say, hey, something's going on, and your duty cycle light will pop up and say, nope, you can't weld until it cools down and it figures
Uh-huh.
itself back out, and then it comes back on. Um, and you go through that and they're like, my machine just keeps stopping and this yellow light's flashing, I don't know what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And what you have to do is you have to go through, okay, what is your tension set at? And they'll tell you 4. Okay, we need that between 2.5 and 3. And
Mm-hmm.
then they'll go, okay, well, now it's still doing it. And you go, okay, well, do you have a 10-pound spool or a 2-pound spool? Like, what kind of wire do you have in there? And they say, we'll tell you, for example, a 2-pound spool. And you say, okay, so the way that the mechanism goes together, you have a washer and a spring and then a nut that goes at the end. And if that spring is the long one and not the short one, you're going to put too much tension on your spool. So then
Mm-hmm.
your spool is trying really hard to spin because you can't even twist it with your hand. So
Yeah.
that motor is pulling that wire through, and you can't, it doesn't do
It's,
anything. It just faults the machine.
yeah.
So then you have to go through and say, okay, let's put the short spring on. And they're like, well, I don't have a short spring. I don't know where any of that stuff's at. Okay, well, okay, let's cut the spring then because we can still use it on the bigger one. Let's go ahead and cut a couple of those rounds off and put it back on there and tell me what it is. Oh yeah, this works great. I'm like, okay, awesome, cool. I'm glad that we could figure that out. So sometimes it's really complicated and you're on the phone for 30 minutes and finally it's like, oh, that's what's
There
wrong.
it is.
Okay. Then they said something and it's like, oh, that's not right. Like,
So
for
you
example,
are like the equivalent to my like odometer onboard diagnostic reader. I just like plug in and it
yeah,
tells me what's wrong. And so
yeah,
like you're the human equivalent to that. That is so
yeah,
cool. So how many machines do you know this way? Like, how many machines do you service?
the full line. So we have 4 easy welds. So
Uh-huh.
we have, let's see, make sure I'm counting these right. And then we have 4 of our just FI machine, our Forney machines, and then we have 4 machines that we have actually just launched a year ago that we final assemble in-house. So we do that all that in Fort Collins. And I know up and down troubleshooting on every single one of those units. So
Wow.
the full line, we just have to know it all. So we learn from one another,
Uh-huh.
my technicians all the time, because obviously I've been there for longer time than most of them in the department. It's been 5 years of doing this, so at this point I've either done it and made the machine do it or I've had a call on it. So it's pretty easy to trace down some days. Some days I'm on a phone call and I'm like, I need to call you back in a couple hours because I have no idea. I need to go downstairs and I need to play with this machine to figure out what's actually happening because
Oh, that's neat.
sometimes it's just so hard.
So you then, I mean, kind of forensics then, you take the problem, try and recreate it, and then fix it. So reverse engineer it, call them back and tell them, hey, this is what's going on.
Yep. Yep. And then I just let them know, like, try this, this, and this. And then they say, okay, well, I'm at work. I'll call you back later. Or, all right, let me try this right now. And sometimes what options we have is we also have an option to FaceTime. So we'll say, okay, can we FaceTime you so that you can look at these machines? And I just, for the other day, we had a customer who was TIG welding and they couldn't get it to weld and they said the tungsten keeps balling up. I don't know what's happening. And we're welding aluminum. It was working the other day. So I was like, okay, we're going through all the steps and like, okay, is your consumables tight? Did you screw your cup on your collet body before you screwed your collet body in the torch? Because then you're gonna have a loose connection. Like, have you checked your polarity, like going through all of the different steps. And I was like, okay, do you have an iPhone? Can we FaceTime or can I video call you somehow? And he's like, yeah, give me a call on this number. So we called him and they had their machine on a table and then they had their piece clamped to the table right next to the machine and they showed me him weld and instantly it was spitting and sputtering and there was sparks coming off of it. I was like, it's not right.
Yeah.
It's not TIG welding. And I asked him, I said, are you outside? Is it windy? And they're like, well, we're not outside. We're in a doorway, but no, it's not windy. Okay. And then I looked again and I was like, you have air coming out of the side of your welder, right? From your fans? And they put their hand up. Oh, yeah, we do. And they moved it to the other corner of the table and they lit it up and it worked great. And so what was happening is the fan was blowing away the shielding gas. And I couldn't know. How would I have figured that out if I couldn't see what
Never.
they were doing? So pictures are a lifesaver when it comes to my job. Troubleshooting is so hard to not be in the same room and say, yes, this is what you're doing.
Well, I mean, it's almost like divine, intervention, having to like kind of, it was one of those deals as a service, technician. I'd get calls and they'd be like, well, my car's doing this, this, and that. And I'd be like, they'd make the noise, recreate the noise for me.
Yeah.
And they'd say, well, that could be various amount of things. Like you need to bring it in, but you don't have that luxury. So that's just impressive to me that you would get such little information. And mind you, not everybody knows the correct terminology. If you asked me to tighten whatever you just did, I'd be like, what thingy on it? What does it
Yeah.
look like? So I'm sure
Right.
you get a lot too.
Yeah. over the years I've had to learn. I think I've always been decent at it, but um, to make it easy to understand the terminology instead of like I just explain the part. Okay, the piece that has the two holes on the side of it that there is another copper piece screwed into.
Yeah.
Oh, this one, yes, that is called the diffuser, or So I try to like teach them while they're on the phone with me too. Some people like it, some
That's
people
neat.
just want me to fix their stuff.
Yeah, no, I would
So,
definitely love that because I can't tell you how many times I know what the part looks like. I can tell you what it does. Ask me what the proper name for it is. No clue. And then
right,
I mean it's not
exactly.
like you can Google what is and then an explanation of
Hmm.
whatever it is. So that's
Yeah.
definitely invaluable information. Is that just something that you learned by experience, or is that something that you guys had like a handbook or like, you know, a blown out figure of what each part in the welder was?
No, it's more from experience. Always wanting to be a teacher, I've always learned how to uh, make whatever I'm saying more understandable so that everybody can understand it, not just an expert.
Yeah.
So I've really trained myself to try to hold back on all the big words and all the mumbo jumbo that people don't understand and talk about things that people understand.
Well,
For
I love that you
instance,
do it very fluently. That you know, you tell us what it is, you describe it, and then give us the proper name, so it doesn't
right.
feel as bad.
Yeah.
And more
Well, like the
unique too.
plasmas.
Great.
Yeah, the plasma cutters, like Tiff was mentioning, I seen your comment down there. Um, but the plasma cutters, honestly, the biggest thing with troubleshooting is that you either don't have enough air pressure
Mhm.
or your consumables are incorrectly or not incorrectly.
Ah,
um, and so what happens is that machine has to be run between 90 and 100 psi coming in from your compressor.
mhm,
That machine regulates that pressure down to 65 internally, but you have to make sure you're at least putting in enough
mhm.
pressure for that machine to work. So when we call or get calls from customers and they're saying this machine's not working, okay, we always go to the compressor. We make sure that they have the right pressure in. And then once we find that out, okay, now let's go to your torch. Okay,
Yeah,
remove all of the pieces that come off of the torch and let me know what you have. Because if you say, okay, do you have this part, and this part, they'll say,
yes.
yep, because they don't know what you're talking about, right? Because you use the names for them and they're like, sure, I probably have it. I don't know what part you're talking about, but I
Yeah.
probably have it. So I've learned to just ask, okay, can you count your parts while you're taking them off? Can you tell me how many parts you have?
Mhm.
And so they'll go through and they say, okay, I have this top part that kind of looks like a cup that has a hole in it, and then I have this other part that is a hard circle that has some holes in it. And a lot of times, the piece that is missing why the machines won't work is because there's a ring that goes on the torch that is the swirl ring, and it has four holes that are drilled out diagonally, and that goes on there to move the air around the electrode, which is the part that the plasma is created from. And they'll be missing that piece because they took their last tip off, threw
Mhm.
it in the garbage, put their next one on, and that swirl ring was stuck to the bottom of it.
Uh,
So then you say, okay, can you find your old pieces? Like, did you actually throw them away, or are they sitting on your counter somewhere? Because I don't know. Let's see if we can find this piece. And then they put it in, and oh, the machine works great. So that's the biggest thing with plasma is just like condition and life of consumables, because a lot of times they'll send you a picture, and their consumables would be far past replacement, and you have to be like, okay, we need you to go buy some new consumables, and it's like, wait, I have to change those? Yes, we got to change those because this is how the machine works, and those are a consumable part. So if you don't rechange them, your machine's not going to work the way you want it to. So,
Well, see, and that's just kind of another thing that we really don't talk a whole lot about. Like, you know, when we're going to school as well as when we're working, um, the maintenance of the machines and the lifespan of the consumables. Like, that's just
mhm.
kind of either knowledge that you're handed down by like a, through an apprenticeship kind of deal, or you have
Mhm.
somebody that's a good mentor for you, or it's just stuff you learn the hard way or having to call
Yeah,
tech. So that's
yep,
really, really neat that you have that knowledge and that desire to teach, because that is definitely something that you can always say, hey, by the way, this is what you should expect to do on upkeep for your machines for them to keep running properly and stuff. So along with the plasma, so that's a whole different dynamic going into the welding part. So now you have to know the plasma end of it, the electrodes and how it turns electricity into plasma to cut, but also the compressor. So now you're learning different machines that are compatible with your machine. How long did it take you to pick all of that up?
Thankfully, it's mostly about the specs of the unit. So we just have to ask, like, okay, go find this plate and let's find that out. But it took me a while to know everything. It took at least 3 months for me to answer probably 25% of my calls, and then it probably took 6 for me to be at like 90% and say, okay, I think I can handle these calls without going to my boss. My boss is a welding engineer, so he knows everything, right? So I'm like, tell me all this information. And so I just really tried to absorb all the stuff that I could in the first year. And then after that, I don't mean to like act like I know everything, but like I feel like I've come a really long, like far way, and I know a lot of stuff now that comes to welding that I never thought I would knew. Like you don't know all of the things inside of a welder.
When you come out of college, you know how to weld.
Right.
That's about it.
Yep, exactly. Yeah.
And I'm not gonna lie, I'm guilty of, I just pull the rig out of the box and kind of read through the instructions, put it together, and trial by fire. And
yes.
If you don't know any better, you don't know any better. So
right.
It's really impressive that you have that. Oh, a fur baby.
She wants to come up here.
So since your learning experience has been trial by fire, now that you're picking up more technicians, do you have a kind of like a training course that you are putting together so that way your new technicians coming on have a more solid experience going in?
Yeah, definitely. Being a teacher, I've learned to teach people in all different ways. Textbook wise, like, okay, here you are, read this and go for it. And also, okay, let me sit down with you and show you how to do this. And then also just to kind of stand back and watch you do it and help you as you go. So I try to make my training pretty versatile and super compatible with whoever I'm training. So I give them the option of, how do you want me to teach you this? And so when they're given that option, I feel like it just opens them up a little bit more, and you get to learn who they are as well as trying to teach them. And that is really helpful when it comes to teaching, to understand a person, because like I said, everybody learns different. So in order to teach somebody, you have to be able to adapt to that. So a lot of times how it works is my technicians are very hands-on. So they want to go head first hands-on on that machine. So we usually put them in the lab first for the first few months and say, okay, use all of our machines, mess with them, try to mess them up, try to change them, and just watch how that machine works and get familiar with it.
Yeah.
And then after they get familiar with it and they say, okay, like, this is how I want it to weld, this is a good setting for it, because you have to learn all the proper settings so that you can give a customer a range to base it off of so that they can go onto their machine and get a good weld. So you have to have all that information. So I think valuable thing to do is just throw them in the lab and have them use all the machines that they possibly can to get familiar with them. And then what we do is we bring them out into the repair area, and we open up a welder and we talk about all the components. We describe everything, what they do, how they help control the power, whether we try to repair it or if we just replace the full components, and just try to get them familiar with that. Like I said, repairing a welder seems really scary. When it comes down to it, repairing a welder is not that bad because a lot of it is plug and play. So it's a really cool trade to have, but it's not it's not the most difficult thing to do if you just pay attention and you understand how it moves from one side to the other, which is pretty
Yeah.
easy to learn. So everybody catches on pretty quick on the repair side, which I think is super awesome. Once they know how the machine works, they jump inside of it and they're like, they're always a little worried at first, but
Yeah.
they catch on pretty quick. And after we do a few repairs, I have them go into the lab and try to break a machine and
Yeah.
then figure out what's wrong with it and go fix it. And
Insane.
during all that time, we're getting customer welders back and we're taking phone calls. So first couple months, 2 months typically, we'll just have them listen to us, take phone calls, help with repairs, and weld. And then during that time, then they start to pick up a phone call here and there.
Hmm.
And we get to 5 a week, and then we go to 10 a week, and then next thing you know, they're at 20.
That's
You know, if it's a
amazing.
busy week,
Because that's
30. So
hard. That was definitely a learning challenge for me. Being on the show is what it's one thing to know what you're doing and do it, but it's another thing to have to articulate it, and explain the hows and whys it does what it does. So not only do you have to be strong in knowing how it should weld, but also why it welds and how it welds, but then also to be able to teach somebody else. So
yep.
I can only imagine the pressure on you. That's insane. That's intense.
Yeah, I love it though. It's so much fun.
You take it in such stride. That is so cool. Tell me about the safety aspect of that. I'm going to tell you right away. The outside of the welder, I am very comfortable with it. Ask me to take stuff apart in there, and I'm like, I don't know about that. I don't care if
Yeah.
the welder's like unplugged. I'm still like,
Yeah, I get that. We have that a lot sometimes with customers. We send parts if it's out of warranty and you need a part and your machine's broke down. We
yeah,
do offer to send you parts for free, and you can fix it even though you're a little bit out of warranty. That's okay as long as you can do it. Then we'll send it to you. So you always have to be very careful when you do that because you have to explain the safety.
yeah,
So you
uh-huh.
have to tell them, okay, when you get to this machine, make sure that you unplug it, you turn it off, and when you take the case off of it, be very careful because that board may still hold a charge because there is capacitors on there. So the capacitors are going to hold that energy. So when you do that, then you have to pull the case off, and then you want to discharge your capacitors. So you can take a voltmeter and you can put your leads to them and you can reduce that power. You can watch it drain out of them. Or if you have a screwdriver that has the plastic handle on it, you can also drain them with those. Because on some of these machines, that capacitor will hold the energy and you go to grab it and you grab it from the heat sinks on it and you're like, oh, okay,
Yeah,
that shocked me. There's a little bit of
yeah.
something in there. So you have to be really careful when it comes down to doing that. And you just have to tell your customers, okay, if you have rubber gloves, just wear your rubber gloves. All of your tools should be insulated. So hopefully they all have like a plastic handle. If they have rubber on them, awesome. That works too. Like, so you just have to prepare the person that's going to be repairing that machine. And once you do that, then you feel pretty comfortable. And then you always give them the option, hey, give us a call. Once you get this, give us a call and we will help you.
Oh, that's
So
amazing. Well, okay. Well, definitely talking to you, I would definitely feel more safe, like calling you up. Hey, walk me through this and make sure that I don't electrocute myself.
yeah.
Because I know, I mean, those capacitors, they hold a lot. I mean, it's surprising. They're tiny little things, but they hold
Yeah.
a whole lot of energy.
Yes, they do.
Was that something that was hard to get over, or were you just, I mean, because you were telling me that you weren't comfortable with the electrical side of automotive. Was that a little bit hard to get over going into repairing
It
well?
was.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was. Sometimes it's still intimidating, but
Mm-hmm.
then I remind myself, like, no, this is fine. You've been doing this for a while. But with like the new machines that we get, everything is upgrading and all of the technology is just getting better. And there's so many more smaller components. And like when they get smaller, then it's just harder to work on. So you have to trace all of these little signals all the way through that board. And sometimes it just gets a little overwhelming and you're like, okay, I need to walk away for a second and I'll come back to this to redo this. And so, yeah, I think that was, it was hard to get over for a little bit, but then I just figured out, I was like, this is actually very valuable to know. It's really good to have all of these different like sides of this position, to be
Mhm.
kind of a jack of all trades, to be able to, to kind of do it all. So
That is so
once,
neat.
yeah, once
So
I
tell
realized that, I
me,
was like, okay.
we're talking about having to get over the fear of the electrical side of things. Tell me, what kind of adversity have you faced in the industry? I can only imagine it, not only being a female, but such a young female getting into this kind of stuff, and then like super techie things that you would figure somebody has got to have been like behind a welder for many years to know the information that you hold. How's that been?
Um, some days it's hard. So, for instance, I know we talked about a different story earlier, but as a technician and receiving calls from customers that that know it all. There's customers that call and they are very upset when they call. And I understand your welder broke down and I get it. You're upset. Like I'm upset too because my welder broke down. It's
Mhm.
just, I get that we all have emotions. And sometimes I'll talk to a customer and they'll be like, no, I know exactly that this machine does not work and you cannot fix it. And I do not want to do troubleshooting. And then they'll ask to talk to my supervisor, who is a guy,
Mhm.
like say that, like I need to talk to a guy, and I just let them know, like, I am the person you're going to talk to because I am the most knowledgeable in the department
Mhm.
and there's nobody else to go to. I'm sorry, but let me help you, please.
Mhm.
So that's really hard to, when I first started, it was very hard to get over. I kind of took that to heart and it hurt me when I got those calls. And it took a lot to get over that and realize that you know what you're talking about. It doesn't matter what they think,
Mhm.
that like you can handle this. So now when we get those calls, it still upsets me a little bit because it
Yeah.
really sucks to know that there's people that don't want to allow me to help them because that's all I want to do is help everybody, and
Aw.
that kind of hurts. So
Yeah.
um, but
Well,
we all overcome
yeah,
it.
it's hard because it discredits everything that you have gone through up until
Mhm.
then. That was definitely something that I had to learn to stop doing. I would like spit out all of my credentials and explain to them why I'm qualified enough to
Yeah.
handle their, whatever was going on. But you said it best. Like you just have to breathe and tell them I am the one you're gonna talk to, and
Yeah.
that's it.
And
The
then,
buck
yeah,
stops here.
and by the end of the call, a lot of times it's, I've been welding for 50 years, I know what I'm doing. And then you say, okay, well, what is the tension inside of your machine? Well, it's set right, it's at 4. And I'm like, well, that needs to be between 2.5 and 3. And how tight is your spool? Well, it moves. And I'm like, okay, how much pressure do you have to put on it? Well, it doesn't move easily. Okay, can we let that move easily? Like, and then they go to weld with them and they're like, oh, okay, it's fixed. Bye. And just like hang up and you're like, okay, well, I'm glad I helped
Well,
you, but like now I feel bad because I don't know what I did wrong.
hey, well, if he got off the phone with you and said it worked, that's a job well
That's
done,
all that matters.
right? So, have you had any allies either at Forney or at your college that have definitely given you or passed along advice, like to help you get over that kind of those kind of situations and people that you would encounter?
Um, yeah, definitely. I think that, like I'd mentioned before, Josh has always been a great part of my life ever since I started going to Front Range in the welding program, and he always tells me, "It's fine. Keep your head up. Like, just keep your head in the game, and it's gonna be all right. Some people aren't gonna believe in you, but you have to believe in yourself." So, I just try to remind myself that I know what I'm doing and that nobody else knows. Like the people that are calling or the people I'm talking to don't know me. They
Mhm.
just know me from picking up the phone and saying that I'm from Forney Industries and
Yeah.
they hear a female voice. So I think just everybody just trying to tell me like, you know what you're doing,
Oh.
then that helped a lot. So it can be really hard going back on the adversity, like when I first started this, I had a position that somebody had offered me, and then I went to go start, and they called me the day before and said, "Nope, I'm sorry. We have too many people in the shop that I don't think would work well around you, and that we can't hire you." And that was probably one of the most heartbreaking things I've ever heard. And I wanted to quit. And I said, I'm not going to quit. I'm just going to prove myself even more. And so that's what I did. And I just continued to pursue welding. And then, I mean, I think that I've made it pretty far in this career. And I think it's awesome to have had the opportunity to
Girl, you have
make
run
this
circles
career.
around those people that wouldn't want you in the shop. I mean, I'm sure if you were to go back, they would be like, you want to run the whole damn thing.
Yeah.
That's hard. That I can only imagine how discouraging that must have been, and how deep you had to dig to say, like, okay, this job does bring me enough happiness that I'm going to keep pursuing it. Was there like a time that you thought maybe you would quit, or was this just a no, I'm gonna show them?
I contemplated it for a little bit. It wasn't long enough for me to fall out of it, but
Mhm.
it was probably like a week, and then I was like, no, this isn't what I'm gonna do. And I talked to a couple different people about it, and they were like, "You're better than that. Like
Yeah,
you can just go somewhere else." I
yeah.
actually had a teacher that taught the teamwork and communications class, and
Mhm.
she um, stood by like basically just like workplace, not necessarily just harassment, but just like the adversity in the workplace and equality, and trying to make it so that people aren't saying, no, you can't work here because you're a female. So she also really helped and just told me, like, just continue to go and don't listen to what other people tell you. If you don't get it, then it's not meant to be. You'll find what's meant to be.
Exactly. Yeah, that was definitely a tough thing that I had to learn, is to let go of those opportunities that I thought were like my only opportunities, to let them go and know that there was somewhere else that was going to be a better fit for me. And I'm really glad that you had that kind of support and network. Um, that is definitely why Tiffany and I decided that we really needed to put this together, so that we had each other, to bounce those ideas off, and to say, hey, you know what? That they can't tell you that. They can't do that to you. You need to go to HR. You need to go to the
Yeah,
EEOC and stuff. Because as uncomfortable as it is, that's really the only way that things start to progressively change, is when you make people accountable for the crappy things that they do. So kudos
definitely.
to you for going back and reaching out for the help that you needed to get, so that you could get further along in your career, because that's hard to get over.
Yes. Yeah, it was really rough, and it's just like disheartening, and it's just like, okay, well then why did I put all this effort in? Like what am I doing? You know? So it was rough, but I'm definitely at a point where it's you just have to learn to forget about like what people think, that just don't it doesn't mean anything.
Yeah,
Um, it's just like social media when you post a picture or you post a video and people are saying bad things. Like, don't let that stuff take over your mind and take over, because it doesn't mean anything. These people don't really know you, you know?
solid
So,
advice. That's definitely solid advice. So Tiffany came in with a great question. This was something that we had last time too, that I had never thought about, because I'd always been like, just so glad to be in the door that I would take whatever working conditions and stuff. But advice to companies when they're starting to hire more young welders, or more young women, or women in general, to come into their companies, what would you recommend?
I would just recommend to be on their side. Listen to them, because if you don't listen to them, that's when things are going to get out of control. We all want to think everybody's great and that everybody's going to be nice to everybody else, but we all know in reality that's not really always how it works.
Yeah,
Um, so I think if you just have an open communication system to where they feel comfortable to be able to come to you or to be in your area and to work for you, then just have that ability for them to come to you if they need anything.
that's amazing.
I think that's one thing my boss has really done is like, if you need anything at all, please come to me. And I think that's really been a great job on him because I don't think I've ever gotten that anywhere else, and I don't think a lot of people do. And I think that's what I enjoy most about this job at Forney is that everybody cares about each other, and we all have like an open book policy, so we all come to each other with everything that we need, and it's really makes things super easy to all work together.
That's great. And that is definitely something that I had never thought about. And I know Athena last week was telling me the same. I don't know if it's like a heritage thing or just because it's, growing up girl thing. I never learned to ask for what I needed or what I wanted.
Mhm.
And so, having a boss to tell you, like, tell me what you need and what you want to be successful is
Mhm.
definitely a good starting point. So I love that you bring that up.
One of the best advices I think I've ever gotten is when I was looking for a job is to tell them what you want instead of waiting for them to tell you what, like to offer you something. Um, I had a job set up to go do fabrication with a company before I got hired at Forney, and I went to my boss and I said, look, this is what you're going to need to pay me, or else I'm not going to work here and I'm going to go to this company over here. And he said, okay, well, let me think about that,
Yeah.
So, and then there's been a spot where a friend has gone in and they waited for their boss to offer them a hourly wage and came back and were very upset because they didn't get what they wanted. And I said, did you tell them what you wanted?
Yeah.
And they said, no, I didn't. I said, well, that's where you messed up. You have to tell people what you want, and you have to tell people right then and there, or else you're not going to have the chance to.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You have to be your own best advocate, your own best
Yes.
friend. And that is definitely something you touched upon when you were giving that advice. Like, you have to trust that you know what you're doing and that you have the position you do because of your experience. So we're rounding out on we're a little bit over the hour. Thank you so much for doing all this with us. But is there anything else that you would like to um, offer women getting into the industry?
I would just say keep your head held high and stay strong. You're gonna get things that you never thought that you would, or maybe that you've already dealt with your whole life.
Mhm.
And just stay strong. Don't let people push you down, and just if they do, get right back up and keep pushing because you'll make it. You really will.
Awesome
So,
advice. One more question.
hmm
I know that before, like women getting into the trades or getting into like career minded kind of deals, it was always thought of either you had your family and you had your career. Do you feel that you can do both within the welding?
yeah. So
Can you have it all? Can we have it all? Like the family, the marriage, the house, the picket fence, the dog, and the job we want.
I think so. I think that if you strive for that and you find the right company, to give you those opportunities, I think you really can. Um, for example, part-time at the college because I get to make my own schedule. I love teaching, so I just try to fill my schedule up, but you can choose. So say if I were to get pregnant and take 9 months off, I would have that option to not teach for that time and to do something different, to either do paperwork or to do something different for the college to kind of offset that time. And then I would also have a different opportunity to take more phone calls and tech calls and do more computer work, which I do now as a supervisor anyway. So more office time and have that ability to get away from the lab and not be around all of that. So I definitely think it is totally possible to have it all.
Yay! I love your your thought process. I love that you're telling everybody that we can do it. Thank you so much for your time. I can't thank you enough. This was an awesome interview.
Yes, thank you for having me, and it was so much fun.
You did absolutely wonderful. So, everybody, join us back next Friday because we will have another guest on our program. And keep up with us because we will be having Gabby back for a tech talk. And I know Tiffany is dying to pick your brain about some of the machines and how they work, and what best products to get for some of our novices that are going through training. So, keep an eye
Yeah,
out.
I'm excited.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye.